In less than 15 years, death as we know it might become obsolete. Not because we cured aging, not because we found the fountain of youth, but because we may not need our bodies anymore. Processing power is finally catching up to the human brain. Some scientists believe that by 2040, we won't bury our dead in the ground, we'll upload them. And if that sounds like science fiction, stay with me, because the groundwork isn't being laid in some secret lab. It's being laid right now, on your phone, in your hospital, and inside a chip that's already been implanted in human skulls. So here's the real question this video is going to ask. If a mind can be copied, is the copy still you? And if the answer is yes, how do you know it hasn't already happened? Let's start with what's real right now in 2026. Brain-computer interfaces used to live entirely in medical trials, devices for paralyzed patients to move a cursor with their thoughts. That was the whole pitch. Restore function. Nothing more. But the technology has quietly slipped past medical and into consumer. Wearable neural sensors are now being marketed for focus tracking, sleep optimization, even meditation apps that read your brainwaves in real time. Every one of those devices is doing the same thing underneath the branding, converting your neural activity into data. Data that gets stored. Data that gets analyzed. Data that, in some cases, gets sold. We already accepted this trade with our location, our search history, our faces. Now the frontier is moving inward, past your behavior, into the electrical signals of the thoughts producing that behavior. That's not a prediction. That's the current state of 2026. The only open question is how far the pipeline goes next. Which brings us to Blindsight. Neuralink's Blindsight implant isn't designed to read your thoughts. It's designed to write directly to your brain. It targets the visual cortex, bypassing the eyes entirely, so that even someone born completely blind could, in theory, perceive basic shapes and light. The device earned Breakthrough Device Designation from the FDA back in 2024, and by January 2026, Neuralink announced it was ready for its first human implant, waiting on final regulatory clearance. Think about what that actually means. This isn't reading data out of the brain anymore. It's pushing digital information in and having the brain accept it as real, unfiltered sensory experience. That's the catalyst. Because once a chip can convincingly manufacture sight out of nothing but signal, the next question writes itself. What else can it manufacture? Sound, touch, memory, an entire environment the brain believes it's standing inside. Restoring vision to the blind is the humane, headline-friendly version of this technology. But underneath it is a proof of concept for something much bigger. A two-way bridge between silicon and the human mind. Now here's where it gets theoretical, but not baseless. Quantum computing has spent the last decade making the kind of leaps classical computers took a century to make. Every year, researchers push past processing thresholds that were considered decades away. And full brain emulation, the idea of simulating every neuron and synapse of a human brain digitally, has always come down to one limiting factor: raw computational power. The human brain runs roughly 86 billion neurons, firing in parallel in real time. For most of computing history, that number was almost comically out of reach. It isn't anymore. Or at least, the gap is closing fast enough that serious researchers are now willing to attach real years to it, instead of just calling it eventually. Some estimates built on current quantum scaling trends point toward the 2040s as the window where emulating a human brain's full complexity in real time moves from theoretical to technically possible. Possible doesn't mean guaranteed. Plenty of scientists think this timeline is wildly optimistic, and they might be right. But impossible has quietly become improbable, and that shift, on its own, is the story. Here's the part that should really unsell you, because you've already lived through the rehearsal. 20 years ago, losing your phone meant losing your photos forever. Today, you don't even think about it. Everything auto-backs up to the cloud the instant it's captured. We didn't notice the moment our memories stopped living in one fragile place and started living as retrievable data. It just happened, quietly, one software update at a time. Now apply that same trajectory to the brain itself. Neural interfaces are already mapping electrical activity. Blindsight-type devices are already writing sensory data directly into the cortex. The next logical, and most experts would say inevitable, step isn't backing up your photo library. It's mapping the actual pattern of synaptic firing that makes you, you. Your memories, your reactions, the specific way your brain lights up when you think of home. Photos were the training wheels. The mind is the real target. And once that mapping is granular enough, you don't just have a record of a person anymore. You have a blueprint. So let's bring this all the way back to the question in the title. If by 2040 technology exists to map a human mind and run it inside a synthetic environment, realistic enough that the mind itself can't tell the difference, ask yourself something uncomfortable. How would you know if it had already happened to you? This is the modern version of a very old philosophical trap, the simulation hypothesis. The idea that any civilization capable of building a perfect simulation of consciousness would probably run many of them. Which means, statistically, a simulated mind vastly outnumbers an original one. If you're picking a mind at random from that pool, the odds aren't in favor of real. For most of history, that idea stayed in philosophy classrooms. Pure thought experiment, no mechanism attached. What's changed in the last 2 years isn't the philosophy. It's that we can now point to actual hardware, actual chips, actual FDA filings, actual quantum benchmarks, and say, this is the mechanism. This is how you'd build it. That doesn't prove we're living in a simulation. It proves the door is no longer theoretical. Someone is actually building the key. Maybe by 2040, this all stalls out. Maybe full-brain emulation stays science fiction for another 100 years, and this video ages like every other flying cars by 2015 prediction. Or maybe someone alive right now reading this sentence ends up as the first mind to make the crossing, and never tells anyone, because from the inside, it would feel exactly like waking up. Either way, the line between biological and digital consciousness isn't a wall anymore. It's a countdown, and nobody's entirely sure what number it's counting down to.